Hello everyone, this is John from Western Maine Defensive Tactics. Today is April 19th, 2018. It's a pretty famous day in history, and it's a special one to me for a couple of different reasons. History isn't the real reason I'm making this video, but I want to cover a couple of historical points before I get into the meat of it. Today is the 243rd anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, when about 700 British regulars marched out of Boston and into the towns of Lexington and Concord and some of the surrounding hamlets with orders from General Gage to confiscate cannon, powder, lead, shot, tents, foodstuffs, muskets, and any other supplies that the colonists had put by, and that could aid in rebellion against the crown. And the result of that, starting to rain here, the result of that was they were fairly well routed by what's basically your average people with average weapons of the time. Some of these people were combat veterans, many were not. Many had never seen a shot fired in anger. Most were in the militia, some were Minutemen, some were neither. Some were older men that had been in militia service, some were just too old to do it, some were too young to be considered to be worthy of service in the militia, or old enough to serve in the militia. But they all lent a hand. Everybody did what they could. And the British were very surprised by this, and I think maybe some of the people were too. But that's definitely a date that every American should be familiar with, and an event that you should research the history on if you're not familiar with it. The history you were taught in school regarding the Battle of Lexington and Concord is most likely very filtered by the teacher or professor that taught you it. Do some reading on your own, and while you're at it, be damn sure to do some reading on the aftermath of the Revolution, particularly what went into writing our Constitution, and in particular the Bill of Rights. Why were the Bill of Rights such a contested issue? What went into every one of those 10 amendments, and why? Know that. On a less triumphant note, April 19th, 1943 is also the anniversary, or also the date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Jews that were ghettoized in Warsaw, Poland by the Nazis saw the writing on the wall and realized that they might as well fight and die rather than just get forced onto boxcars, sent to places like Auschwitz, and die for certain. At least when you fight, you have the dignity of choosing the way you die, and maybe you'll survive. But if you go to the oven, you'll most definitely die. Those are just two things I like to keep in mind, and you should research that as well. What I'm doing out here next to the pond is I just went out for a hike with my gear and my rifle. And this is one of those things that, and don't think that I think I'm a prophet, I'm no smarter than the next guy. About 20 years ago, I started railing in various newspapers with letters to the editor and things like that about Americans that don't appreciate what they have, they don't appreciate what the Founding Fathers set up for them as far as a government, and that we need to know our Bill of Rights, and we need to know things like this. And for the record, this is an FN, FAL, FAL, whatever you'd like to call it. It's a military pattern, box-fed, semi-automatic .308 rifle. And in my opinion, weapons like this are the cornerstone of liberty. They are what the Second Amendment was written for. But even if the Second Amendment evaporates, even if they decide to take every copy of the Bill of Rights and burn it, that's not going to change my rights to this weapon or anything like it one iota, because my rights are a pre-existing right. The Second Amendment, the Constitution, is just a piece of paper. Rights are forever. But two things I want to talk about, because that have dawned on me. Everybody likes to talk about guns. Everybody likes to talk about gear and how you're going to carry it. Two things that concern me with the upcoming years. And I dare say that the two historical incidents kind of demonstrate the two sides of that coin. Whereas the colonists in early America, or the British colonies at the time, understood that they were under a repressive regime, and as things got less and less livable, they became more and more resistive. they saw the writing on the wall. They understood where they were heading. So they got weapons. They practiced with weapons. They trained with weapons. They got their gear together. They got in condition. They did what they could to prepare. And they instilled in their kids a tradition of self-defense, of handling weapons well, being able to hit what you aim at, and being good at fieldcraft, that sort of thing, being good woodsmen. Well, the Jews in Warsaw did not have that tradition, and I think that's changed now with the Jewish community, particularly in Israel. That's a good thing. But they had to learn a hard lesson in Warsaw, and in fact in the entire Holocaust. They learned a hard lesson. At the time, they didn't have a tradition of self-defense. They didn't have a tradition of keeping capable weapons to hand, remaining skilled in them, and they paid a price for it. They had to learn in the moment how to resist, how to handle weapons with whatever weapons they could come up with, catch as catch can. They didn't have the advantage that we Americans have of choosing a weapon that suits them, that they like, that they enjoy using, that they can become skilled with and prepare well with. They did not have that option. We sure as hell do, and I recommend that you do that. The election of any president is not going to solve this problem. The election of any president is not going to solve the death knell. There are people that thought that President Obama was going to make everything perfect. There are people that think that President Trump is going to make everything perfect. They're wrong. No single president, no politician is going to get us out of this. It's we the people that are going to have to solve our own problem, because we the people have been slack on our citizenship and allowed this situation to happen. I know people that weren't happy with the election of Barack Obama. I know people that weren't happy with the election of Donald Trump. But what are they actually doing about it besides crying? That sort of thing. You need to know your history, because you need to know how our nation was founded. So if the day comes when we can actually set it back on firm political footing, we can do that. If you're ignorant of history, you don't understand where the basics are, the basic foundation of our country comes from. You're part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I'm not saying I know it all. I read books all the time. And in that regard, it's important not to, or to be aware of revisionist history. Choose solid history references. Don't fall for like the Michael Belisailes trap, that sort of thing. There's a ton written on firearms. Get outside of the firearms. We all love to talk about guns. I love my guns too. The two issues that I think that are most crucial, and what I'm going to invest quite a lot of time in this summer and going forward, are physical fitness. It's always been a hobby of mine, always been part of my life. And communications, which has not. I'm a ham radio operator at the basic level. I haven't really invested a lot of time in it, but if you look at the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and we all know Paul Revere, what we were taught, or if you watch Schoolhouse Rock, you were taught the British are coming, the British are coming. Everybody in the colonies at the time considered themselves a British citizen. So the British weren't coming, the British were there, they were them. It was the regulars are out. And if they hadn't set up a comprehensive communication plan, which they did, which Paul Revere was a big part of, and most people don't think beyond the fact that he rode a horse at midnight. Well, he was captured. He was captured. He didn't really succeed in his mission, but other people did. That's why all those militiamen came as the British were retreating from the battles at Old North Bridge and on Lexington Green. And the Minutemen flooded in. The militia flooded in. But anyway, that's something you can research on your own. What I recommend you do is you find a place where you can get out in your environment, whatever your environment is. Carry your gear. Carry your weapons. Get out there and start becoming one with them. I used to do this a lot when I was younger, and I kind of got out of the habit in the last 2 or 3 years, but I'm going to definitely get back into it, because I have a really good place here, as you can see, to get out unfettered, unbothered by people, and just hike through the woods, up and down hills, things like that. Anyway, we're going to talk more about some of these subjects as we go, and I hope you guys will take this to heart. I realize I rambled on, but this has been in my head quite a while. My family and I had an interesting experience this weekend. Saturday we participated in the pro-gun rights, pro-Second Amendment rally in Augusta, Maine, which was pretty well attended. Maine doesn't have a huge population, but we had about 600 or 800 people there, which was a pretty decent turnout, especially for as cold and as windy as it was. And from there, we left to go to Massachusetts, into the Lion's Den, I call it. And the ironic part is we were going to see the reenactment of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. We'd been there a few times to see it. But legally, I couldn't bring any weapons with me. It's funny because we were in the cradle of liberty, the place where this all happened. And I would get arrested and thrown in jail for possession of a weapon like this. Even though it's my absolute right to defend myself. It's my absolute right to the weapons to defend myself with. I couldn't bring a pistol, couldn't bring a shotgun, none of that stuff. I took other measures, and we were all right. But it was very ironic. I'm sitting there watching in the rain the British forces, the colonial forces, fight it out. Then we went to the Old North Bridge and saw another reenactment. In an environment that really appreciated their history, and I dare say made a lot of money of it, made a lot of money off it, but wouldn't allow their citizens to own proper weapons for defense. That's just a thought. There'll be more on this to come. I have some things to say about rifles and shotguns and things like that. Excellent rifle. Consider it. I consider the .30 caliber battle rifle the cornerstone of liberty because, God forbid, things actually happen. This is all we'll have. This is all the average person will have because it's the most practical rifle for the average person. I don't have the money for an aircraft carrier. I don't have the money for any heavy equipment. I don't have the money for anything belt-fed. I can manage this, I can master this, I can support this, and I can afford it. This is why the .30 caliber rifle will rule. I'm not against 5.56 or 223, but when you've got to penetrate cover, when you've got to reach out, when you've got to hit hard, I like the 308, and I like the 20-round box magazine as well. And if you look in my environment, my shots may not be that long, but there's a lot of cover to penetrate. Anyway, we'll discuss that more. I hope you can hear me over the wind.